First Minister's questions, but it doesn't even have any analysis of it. It's just Brian Taylor sitting at his desk, and then he says, "Now over to the chamber." Um, but yeah, so I mean, I think the fact that was where it became apparent that what we were doing was actually really quite important, because it was genuinely providing a service, a journalism service that just didn't exist anywhere else.
This is one of the things about the current alternative media scene, in that in certain ways it seems very fragmented. You've got, Wings does what he does, and everyone sort of tunes into it. He's very good at the debunking stuff, and then Bella has always got really good opinion stuff. And what you were providing a service there that not other people do. Stephen Payton does his stuff as common space. And there's other podcasts now. There's a political podcast or a political podcast, and different things going on now as well. The Derek Bateman, but do you think they help each other enough? I mean, that's a very interesting question. I think it seems in many ways fragmented. Sometimes you could even argue that I've heard in some circles that, certain people believe that others are trying to dominate the scene. And I genuinely think people should be trying to help each other more in order to make a kind of more unified service between everyone. But there seems to be, oh, I don't want to promote that one, I don't want to promote that one. Do you think that's unfair?
Well, I think it's an interesting point, and I haven't. It takes me back to when I was doing NewsShaft. I'd kind of forgotten that this argument was one that often came up. Um, perhaps it isn't exactly what you're saying, but a lot of people seem to suggest that the alternative media outlets in Scotland should work together, and if they did, they would create something far more powerful. And I don't agree with that. I can see why people think that, but it's one of these conversations that, I've had with people within all of these other organisations. I mean, we talked about it quite a lot, with people from Commonweal, with Wings Over Scotland, with Derek Bateman's one, Bella Caledonia. But yes, we have all talked about it, and it's one of these things that makes perfect sense when you're within these organisations, but I can see why it doesn't out with. The problem is, if they all came together, the first question would be, okay, well, financially, they wouldn't be any better off. I mean, yes, arguably, if Wings Over Scotland came on board and just split his money with everyone, but I don't think I don't really think that's fair on anyone.
No, it's not. I mean, like
But
people donated that money to
yeah,
Wings, then that's,
of of course, and I think that the thing is that each of the organisations are doing different things. What we were doing with NewsShaft was very different to what Common Space was doing, for example. I mean, we weren't doing investigative journalism. There was a little bit towards the end. Carol and Scott did a kind of investigative journalism documentary programme, but by and large, that wasn't really our field. It was news, comment, and broadcast media. And Bella again is the sort of the broadsheet, if you like, of the Scottish politics alternative media world, and they all kind of do very different things. And I think to suggest that they all come together is really just a way of overlooking the fact that they all need funded, because no one suggests that all the newspapers come together to make one newspaper. It would be a nonsense suggestion.
hmm
No one's suggesting that the National joins forces with all of these other alternative media outlets. In fact, if the National shows a slight drop in sales, people are all over Twitter saying, "Go out and buy the National. We must support it." And yet, that's what NewsQuest. It's not even a Scottish company. And it doesn't. I mean, the National is fair enough in terms of the team that work on it and so on, but the company that own it are not interested in Scotland or Scottish politics or independence.
So you would
It's
say the
a
Nationals a commercial opportunity to have an independent supporting paper. They saw it and they took it.
I don't think that anyone could see it in any other way. I mean, that's not to do down the people who work on the National, the people who write in the National. I know that they're quite understaffed and under-resourced, and they do the best they can in there. The cynicism of the National doesn't come from its editor, it doesn't come from its journalists. But on a broader kind of point, it shows the difference between alternative media and traditional media in that when alternative media is struggling for money, the suggestion from tends to be, oh, well, you should all group together and somehow work it out. Whereas when a mainstream media publication like The National, for example, is struggling, the suggestion is, well, we have to just buy more of it. We must spend more money. People understand fundamentally that journalism needs to be paid for, but when it comes to alternative media, I think a lot of people don't quite get that because so many people are willing to do it for free.
Yeah, even if they have to put a lot of work into it, there is a certain element of doing it because it's their passion to do so and so on. But
Yeah.
uh, let's move this on a bit to the mainstream media because we were coming there with the National, and there's certainly a lot of stories around that, I don't know, highlight some of the problems, shall we say, that we can see at the moment. Let's start with Philippa Whitford because let's just have a good old gripe now because I think that was absolutely outrageous. I mean, we're very open to Daily Mail bashing on the Scottish Independence podcast. How did that story strike you?
Well, I don't read the Daily Mail as a rule. I'm not its biggest fan, I must say. But well, it didn't surprise me. I mean, they can. I think actually, in some ways, I've almost had a bit of respect for the Daily Mail with these stories. Not respect in the traditional sense, but just because it's so impressive, just how much of a spin they can put on certain stories which are really positive stories, and turn them into negative stories. I mean, Philippa Whitford gave up part of her Christmas holidays to go and work in a hospital.
Well, to go and save
That's
people's lives. It was it's
yeah,
MP
that's.
MP
I
goes
mean,
to save people's lives.
that is a very positive story, and yet they managed to turn it into a story where she was evil in some way. I mean, I can't even remember how they did it, but that's quite impressive. They were also did it with the because I remember it was one of the stories at the when the SNP first got all their seats in Westminster. There was a story in can't remember the paper. It may have been the National about what all of the MPs did. And the one that stuck out for me was, and I forget his name, who is a barber, and he still cuts hair on a Saturday afternoon sometimes. And I thought, oh, that's really nice. That's a very kind of down to earth politician there, and and they managed to take that and turn it into a sort of second job scandal.
It's remarkable, just the vitriol. Even though, as you've said earlier, all media outlets are biased, but I think a lot of the alternative media
The
outlets
Daily
tend
Mail
tend
is a
to sort
special case, I think.
yeah, but I think a lot of the alternative media tend to be upfront about their bias. I mean, this is called the Scottish Independence Podcast. What do you want? Like the fact that they purport to, kind of be an arbiter of what's going on in society, and they do these kind of things. Do people really buy it anymore? The fact that these people are supposed to be impartial and tell us what's going on, or do people really now just believe,
Well, the great irony was it today that the I say I don't read the Daily Mail, but I did weirdly read their big editorial thing. Well, I skim read their editorial thing that they had today. I think who will speak for England? I think was the headline. I think that was today.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yesterday, yeah.
I think it was sort of just a kind of reactionary response to the Europe thing. I think as is so often they're wont, but there was a piece in it talking about how we stood up against the fascists at the beginning of the Second World War, stood against Hitler. And I just thought, well, the Daily Mail didn't. I mean, the Daily Mail is very much on record as being supportive of Hitler.
hmm Yep, you can look up the headlines very easily on a Google image search.
Yeah, but yeah, they just seem to have no shame.
Sometimes you sort of wonder why people still buy it, although it must be that they are singing to certain people's prejudices, and that's why. I don't know. Actually, I'll tell
Well,
you a
yeah,
secret. I'll
but
tell you, tell you a secret. I once had a family member that bought the Daily Mail, and I used to argue with him about it very, very often. And his excuse was, "I know the political content is terrible, but they have the best TV guide." That was his excuse for buying the Daily Mail.
or it's the sport. It's the other excuse. That's what people say about the Sun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or the Daily Record. Yeah, they might pull people in with other things. I would like to think, although it probably isn't the case, that the reason that people read the Daily Mail is the same reason that I watch quite a lot of Fox News. I just find it quite entertaining, you know. You never know what's going to happen next. Doesn't certainly doesn't mean that I align myself in any way with Fox News.
No, I do watch it occasionally. I'd recommend to everyone who's listening to watch online the documentary Outfoxed about Fox News if you haven't seen it.
Oh yeah, that's very good. And there's they did loads of extra stuff as well, which is online. So when you finish watching it, there's loads of other stuff they made.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Fox News, I'd like to watch it for the comedy element, but after sort of 5 minutes, you start to get a bit angry. Does that not happen to you?
I don't know. I think I've got past that. I used to get quite angry at it, but I just watched Bill O'Reilly because it's so far removed from what we have in this country in terms of news coverage. Just a man shouting at you what to think with bullet points reminding you what to think.
Yes, but without actually any content. Just this is my gut feeling, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's quite, and then masquerading as a news channel. Okay, so let's move on to another one of the stories. Because there are serious problems apart from with the mainstream media, apart from the declining sales figures and declining viewerships and everything. I think the Angela Haggerty recently was very interesting. Did you see about this?
I'm not sure how much I can talk about this because I haven't read masses about it, but I'm aware of it. It's obviously very concerning, and I think in light of other things that have been happening lately, it doesn't look good. It seemed like a very kind of dodgy, knee-jerk response, and kind of goes against the whole idea of what you would expect from, well, any kind of serious newspaper. And I think for the Herald, it's kind of one of the ones that we still kind of hold up there.
And to see them being, well, the accusation is that they've been bullied so easily as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, who knows what happened behind closed doors, but I think it's always dangerous when anyone can have that sort of influence over journalism, and I think that it's probably a microcosm really of just the whole problem, which and not just with Scottish journalism anywhere in the world really. Newspapers, media outlets, unless they're state broadcasters, rely on money from corporate interests to keep them going. I mean, it's not just the cover price that pays for them, advertising and access and so on. And I think that that does just cause problems with the media across the world. And I think that that's really just symptomatic of that. I mean, it was obviously quite a specific thing, but it goes against that idea that editors are supposed to stand by their journalists and not let that kind of thing happen.
Yeah. And I think it's a problem for the alternative media as well, in that it's possible on alternative media to find advertising and advertisers, but I think one of the reasons that people tune into alternative media is that there isn't advertising and advertisers. But although that could fund your project, but you don't want it to because you're aware that part of the reason your audience is there is that there isn't any of that and there isn't that influence. So it's a kind of catch-22 for alternative media there as well.
It's not just about advertisers, though. I mean, the main problem that alternative media has, and I'm wary of saying this because it's controversial, and I know that it never goes down well, but so much of the alternative media in Scotland is built off the back of the independence referendum, and therefore the people who are reading it, the people who are listening to it, consuming it, generally speaking, are independence supporters, and in the main, SNP voters. Just statistics would show that that would be the case. And then you have the problem where it's not so much about corporate intervention or influence, but a fear of criticising the SNP, because I know that when we've done stories on NewsShaft where they were maybe a little bit critical of something that the SNP had done, you know, we got lots of people complaining that we had become as bad as the rest of them. We were suddenly biased. Or people would no longer be giving us any money. And I know I've heard similar stories from other alternative media outlets. Common Space have had problems with that as well. Anything that is seen to be a bit critical of the SNP, lots of people get very annoyed online. I'm not saying the majority of people, a very small slither, but they're quite loud. And that is a problem because I think if the problem in Scotland was a biased media, then the last thing we want to do is replace it with an